Thank you, Acting President. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak briefly about the Crimes Amendment Retail, Fast Food, Hospitality and Transport Worker Harm Bill 2025. Look, crime is a huge issue in Northern Victoria. I'm aware of students recently that went into a shop in Bendigo and they were confronted by someone coming in and stealing a whole lot of goods. I've heard the same from local businesses that have been confronted by people coming in and abusing them. And I think we've all said in this chamber today how important it is that our retail workers and those working in hospitality and Uber drivers and others, that they are safe. I know I have two kids with their summer jobs, and during the year that they work in the industry in hospitality, and they are on the front line as workers are. Now, the Premier did say back in May 2024 that, well, there was a promise made to protect retail workers, but here we are, December 2025, and what we're seeing is the introduction of a bill that enables the government to do a media release, but as we've heard in the chamber today, it has little effect on what actually happens. I know Mr Mulholland and Mr Limbrick spoke to that earlier. Now, we've seen news reports. I know The Age reported in September the Victorian retail workers are dealing with a crime every 5 minutes as the state grapples with an alarming crime crisis that shows no signs of getting better. Now, we've heard that both verbal and physical abuse towards customer-facing workers has reached very worrying levels, and we know that unions and employers have raised concerns, but we've all raised concerns certainly and share those concerns. Now, I know the Department of Justice provided some data when they were looking into this bill, and it's interesting to see some of the statistics, but it states that in response to a survey of Australian Retailers Association members, the ARA reported in June 2025 that anecdotally 51% of retailers surveyed said they experience physical abuse monthly or more often, and 87% of retail workers experienced verbal abuse. Additionally, 55% of transport workers undertaking gig work, including food delivery, parcel delivery and ride share, who responded to a TWU survey, reported experiencing threatening or abusive behaviour, with 43% noting the risk of being abused by a customer as a significant concern to them. And data released by the Victorian Crime Statistics Agency is consistent with this. The CSA report for the year ending June 2025 showed recorded retail crime offences in Victoria rose 20%, and that's up to nearly 100,000 to 99,114 from the previous year. So the CSA data also reported that assault and related offences in retail settings increased 21% year on year. Now that is extraordinary. And to quote Chris Rodwell from the Australian Retailers Association, he said, "We're seeing a criminal offence at least once every 5 minutes in a retail setting, an assault every couple of hours, and cases of aggravated robbery and weapon-related offences daily or more." Now, I know my Nationals colleague, Ms Benham, in the other House shared a couple of instances that have happened in Mildura recently, and it is appalling to hear what's been reported. But two cases where there was a spree of shoplifting, where a young woman was one of them. But in one of those situations, the retail workers went and approached them because they were conscious that shoplifting had been taking place. Now, they got stabbed with a syringe while working. And the magistrate did acknowledge that there's been a tsunami of criminal cases, and that was not just Mildura but across the state. But as Ms Benham pointed out, these offenders were released on bail, and as Mr Trung-Lu mentioned earlier, that the weakened bail laws are contributing to the situation that we find ourselves in now. Now, we know that there is a lot of retail crime that doesn't go or doesn't get reported. And I've spoken with business owners that are very concerned about reporting issues. They're afraid about getting retaliation. And I was, shocked recently. We see that there are now self-defence classes being subsidised by the City of Greater Bendigo, because we are so aware of the issues that we have in our community, and we continue to see the crime rates go up and up across all areas. And yet we know that we've had the toughest bail laws, and then we saw further legislation to toughen the toughest bail laws. But the response of this government has been very slow and very odd in some cases. We saw $13 million spent on the machete bins, which are under cameras, expecting criminals and others to come up and drop off their bins. But I certainly know that a lot of law-abiding citizens have done that, but not so sure about those that should be returning them. But here we are again with this legislation that brings in changes that are just expanding definitions but not increasing the, possibly not going to address the issues. But we've said very clearly that if a Liberal and Nationals government is elected next year, that we'll introduce a number of changes to really tackle this crime crisis that we're facing head on. And Jack's Law is one of those, to allow the police to search for people for knives. There'll also be a tougher policy on breaching bail to combat Victoria's record crime rates. And we have talked about the need for rehabilitation programs and prevention programs, because that is very important, that there are so many different aspects to addressing this crisis. I know we held a crime forum in Kangaroo Flat, and I've had listening posts in Kennington and wherever I go across northern Victoria, even at Wodonga last week. Residents do raise the issue of crime. And this is, as I mentioned, rushed legislation, and I know Mr Walsh in the other House talked about the workplace protection orders and how important they are, and as Mr Mulholland pointed out, we've put forward amendments to be considered by this chamber. But Mr Walsh in his contribution talked about the number of organisations that have been really pushing for this, places like Woolworths, IKEA, Myer, Kmart, 7-Eleven and Bunnings, and asking that the government introduce workplace protection orders and implement legislation that enables courts to issue enforceable orders, restricting high-harm repeat offenders from engaging in violence, threats or harassment in and around retail workplaces. And I know Mr Gaelle talked earlier about the further work that is going to be done, but it should have been done, and this needs to be a priority by this government. And we've seen that this legislation in other areas, such as the Australian Capital Territory, a police sergeant in the ACT police said that in the 8 months that WPOs have been used in the ACT, police have noticed a total change in behaviour where the offenders have just disappeared off their screens. So they've had some good outcomes have been delivered by having those WPOs in place. But as has been mentioned, this bill certainly does not have that. Now, I know our electorate officers, as I've mentioned before, they have security. We have the ability to lock the front door. We have glass screens, and my office is right in the middle of Bendigo, and I think we have this incredible security in place, and yet all the other shops and retail stores in Bendigo do not have that. Their staff are vulnerable, and they are feeling threatened in many instances. I've spoken to people about a number of different issues that have been happening. So more needs to happen. This bill certainly doesn't go far enough. And we do think of all those workers during Christmas who are flat out as we head towards a very, very busy season. And we do want to see them safe and protected. But as I said, this bill will not do that. Thank you.